Morning. Please be seated. Good morning. The Commissioners again are conducting concurrent hearings today, so I'll conduct this hearing this morning. The other Commissioners will refer to the transcript and recording of the hearing and may have follow-up questions in due course. The witness, Mr. Harrison, I believe you're taking affirmation. Would you please just stand and state your name for the record?
I, Kevin John Harrison.
And the affirmation, please.
Thank you. I, Kevin John Harrison, sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence that I give to this Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Please take a seat. And Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Harrison, you've been invited to prepare a further witness statement for this phase of the Royal Commission's hearings, I understand?
Yes.
And you've done so?
Yes.
That is your second witness statement dated the 27th of August 2021?
Yes.
Of, I think, 18 pages. You have a copy of that with you?
Yes.
It was signed by you?
Yes.
And the contents are true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information and belief? Document number GWC.003.0016.0001. That's Mr. Harrison's evidence in chief, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. That document is admitted. Ms. Spencer.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Harrison, the purpose of today is to explore some further topics with you and, if necessary, just clarify your evidence on some of the matters which Mr. Lee covered with you at your last appearance on the 18th of May. Now, when you gave evidence on the last occasion, you didn't recall the memorandum explaining the difference between poker machines and EGM. Do you recall that evidence?
Yes.
Yes. Now, what is your understanding of the difference between a WA poker machine, a WA electronic gaming machine, and a poker machine?
The poker machine is where it has the balls dropping down, and the electronic gaming machine is more of a visual thing where it doesn't create that fast drop down speed like the ball.
Were there any other distinctions in your mind between the two?
Well, the timing, the EGMs were slower in being recorded.
Slower in, how do you mean slower?
The time taken to get an answer.
So the speed of the game?
Speed of the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that goes to my next question about use of the term speed of play. So that's your understanding of the concept?
Yes.
Speed of play. Now, how has that become your understanding of speed of play? In terms of, did someone explain that to you, or is it self-taught, or?
Yes, it was explained by members of the department, by the chairman and by the chief casino officer.
And and who was the chairman that explained that to you?
That would have been Barry.
Barry Sargent?
Yes.
And the chief casino officer?
When I first joined, it may have been Mick Connolly. Yeah.
Who else could it have been?
So Mr. Helgi, is it?
Now, when you were last before the Commission, you gave evidence that the speed of play was one of the factors the GWC considered when it was deciding whether or not to approve an electronic gaming machine. I'll just refer to those as EGMs. Do you recall that evidence?
Yeah.
Now, broadly speaking, during your tenure on the GWC, what was the GWC's attitude to the speed of play of EGMs?
Well, when AGMs came up for presentation and approval, if they appeared to be faster than and similar to a poker machine, they were queried and either rejected or asked them to have a look at the timing.
All right. And there was a particular timing during your tenure that was the allowable length of a game in terms of number of seconds?
Yeah, it was the 6 seconds. Yeah.
Now, I'd like you to look at an agenda and some minutes from a GWC meeting in March 2014, Mr. Harrison. So I'll bring those up in front of you. Just on the private screen, if I may, it's gwc.002.0016.0126.r. Now you'll see there the first page of that document, that's the agenda for March 2014.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Now if we scroll down to page 22, please. This is agenda item 5.2. This relates to the Shuffle Master EGM ball delivery and the Flintstones Cape Fortune game. Now you can see from the background there on page 22, Mr. Harrison, that the GWC were concerned about the ball delivery mechanism of symbols within that game. Do you recall that issue?
I don't recall it, but I was there, so I accept it. Yeah.
All right, well, this is just the agenda pack. Perhaps what we'll do is we'll just scroll slowly through this agenda item just to help you refresh your memory. And just let me know if there's any page you'd like to stop at.
Yeah. Yep.
Would you like me to pause on that page, Mr. Harrison?
Yes, please.
Next page, please. Next page, please. Would you like the opportunity to read this letter, the entire letter, or would you just like to scroll through this, Mr. Harrison? And is it assisting in recalling this matter?
Yes.
Next page, please.
Yep.
Next page, please. Next page, please.
Yep.
Thank you. And I think that might be the last page. We'll just check. This is the last page of that agenda item. Does that assist in refreshing your memory, Mr Harrison, about this matter? Now, what I'll do is I'll call up the minutes. That is GWC.0002.0016.0129. It's the GWC meeting, the 25th of March 2014. We can see that on the first page, and you can see on the first page there, Mr Harrison, your name that you were present at that meeting.
Yes.
Now, if we could scroll down to item 5.2 on the second page, please. Now, if you could just read that to yourself, Mr Harrison, item 5.2.
Yes.
Now, what I'd like to ask you about is the second paragraph, which is just one sentence. Now, the second part of that sentence says, the Deputy Director General was requested to liaise with Crown Perth with a view to decreasing the game speed by a further 20%. You see that?
Yes.
Do you recall the discussions which resulted in this request being made?
Yes, because there was still the thoughts from some of the commissioners that the ball drop appeared too quick and was very much like for a poker machine.
I see. Now, do you agree with me that looking at the minutes from that meeting, that the GWC's attitude at that time was to decrease EGM speed of play, so in effect make games longer?
I think it, yes.
Now, do you recall if that attitude was in the context of machines using the ball delivery system, like this game here, or EGMs generally?
No, it was with the ball delivery system.
I see. Now, do you recall whether the Deputy Director General liaised with Crown Perth about the game speed?
Yes, because we had follow-up.
All right. Now, I'll just bring up the GWC's agenda for its June 2014 meeting. That's GWC.0002.0016.0115. Just at page 9, please. So you'll see the agenda item 4.1 there, and then the top line of that table refers to a verbal update to be provided at the 24th of June meeting. That accords with your recollection, Mr Harrison?
Yep. Yes.
All right, we'll turn to the minutes. That's GWC.0002.0016.0116. And if we just call up the first page for the attendees, and you can see your name third on the list there, Mr Harrison.
Yes.
And you can see there also that Mr Michael Conley attended as the Deputy Director General. You see that?
Yes.
Now, turning to the bottom of page 1, you can see item 4.1 there.
Yes.
The subparagraph with the little I. And there are 2 short paragraphs. If we could bring maybe page 1 and 2 of these minutes side by side, please. Just because it spreads over the next page. And if you could just read 4.1i to yourself, Mr Harrison.
Yes.
Now, do you know if anyone at that meeting asked Mr Conley how he made those inquiries with Crown Perth? So whether it was a phone call or an email, or he went there in person or otherwise?
No, I don't know.
You don't recall if anyone asked?
No.
Now, there's a reference there to adverse consequences on the third line.
Yes.
Are you able to give the Commissioner any insight as to what consequences Mr Connolly was referring to there?
Besides, I think there was an economic consideration as to involved, but one of the main reasons from memory was that there was only a certain number of machines provided by the suppliers because they were different in Western Australia to what was provided in other states. But Burswood was finding a lack of gaming machines to put on display.
And so when you say the economic, because this is dealing with, he made inquiries whether the game speed could be increased. So when you say economic considerations, what is it that you mean?
That and I guess it's taken into account the return to Burswood would be reduced and the return to the state.
If there was a necessity to alter that particular game.
Yeah.
Is it because of the cost involved in Crown having to have a third party amend just those machines?
Yes.
Is that what you mean? Now, on page 2 of the minutes there, you'll see there's a reference to unwanted outcomes from increasing the time taken to play an EGM. Do you recall what the unwanted outcomes were?
No.
Now, you say in your witness statement, paragraph 41, that it was resolved that no further action was to be taken in relation to this issue. So why was that? What was the collective view of the GWC?
Because they had received that information from Crown as to where it generally complied with the Australian standards.
And then was it a mixture also to those economic issues that you were just talking
Yes.
about earlier as well?
Yep.
All right. Now, in paragraph 35 of your witness statement, you talk about verifying or inspecting game source code. Perhaps if you could just turn to that. You've got that in front of you, your statement.
Yes.
Now, the 5th line down, you refer to the testing facility also provides a HMAC SHA1 signature.
Yeah.
Could you explain to the Commissioner what that is?
It's a key hashed authentication code, which is in combination with a secret cryptographic code. And it allows the inspectors, when they're checking the machines, to check the signature and to confirm the integrity of the software.
So are we talking about a particular device?
No, it's what would you call it? It's a certification that's a part of the machine, that's incorporated into the machine.
I see. So the inspectors check whether that signature is present in the machine?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to jump back in time, and I'd like to go back to August 2010.
Yes.
Now, do you recall in 2010 that Burswood, as it was then, was looking to expand its casino operations?
Yes.
Now, I'll take you to the agenda item in the August board papers. It's GWC.0002.0016.0007. Perhaps just on the private screen, please. So we can just see perhaps if we could just show the first page to show that it's the August 2010 agenda. Is that in front of you, Mr. Harrison?
Yep.
Yes. Now, if we go to page 15, and you'll see here that the topic of agenda item 4.2 is the redevelopment of the Burswood Entertainment Complex, and there's some recommendations provided there. And one of those is to, you see that at point 2, an increase in the number of EGMs to 2,000, up from 1,750, increasing the gaming tables
Yes.
by 50, and the licensed casino gaming areas.
Yeah.
Do you recall this issue?
Yes.
Before the GWC?
Yes.
All right, now if we turn to page 18, now this is a detailed letter from Burswood to Mr. Sargent as the chair of the GWC. Sorry, I might be starting at page 19. Now, I don't expect you to, it's quite a lengthy letter, so I don't expect you to reread everything sitting here today. But if we just scroll through slowly, please. Do you recall reading this letter at the time, Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
And it was your usual practice to read these board packs from cover to cover in advance of the GWC meetings?
Yes.
We could keep scrolling, please. Now, at page 38, if we could stop at the start of 38, please. This is an impact assessment of the proposed increase in gaming capacity at the Burswood Entertainment Complex Do you recall reading this document at the time? Perhaps I'll scroll through it so you can have a look at that. And if we could pause when we get to page 45, please. Is this looking familiar, Mr. Harrison?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, perhaps if you could just read this page to yourself, please.
Yes.
Now, there is a reference in the first half of that page to some prevalence rates of problem gambling found by the Productivity Commission in 1999. So that's in the first paragraph,
Yeah.
mostly. Right. And do you recall reading the Productivity Commission's report at all into gambling?
No.
Now, how did the GWC inform itself in relation to harm minimisation? In terms of inform itself as to what would be, say, best practice in the context of casino gaming?
I'm not sure if I understand what you...
Perhaps I'll start with another question. Were you provided with any training when you were on the GWC in respect of harm minimisation?
No.
So when you were looking at issues like harm minimisation, how did the GWC know what was good practice and what was not good practice? Or how did it know what ideal practice would be?
Well, papers like this, which gave indications from the Productivity Commission as to the effects of gambling,
All right.
it was about all we had.
Okay. Now, do you recall that in August 2010, this Burswood expansion was agreed to in principle?
Yes.
All right, I'll just bring up those minutes. It's gwc.0002.0016.0015. We'll just bring up the first page. Just to confirm your attendance there, Mr. Harrison, second from the bottom. You see that?
Yes.
And now if we go to page 2, please. And item 4.2. And you can see the resolution there. Approving those
Yes.
matters in principle. Do you recall the discussions between the GWC members from that August 2010 meeting?
Well, there was a focus on the expansion that was proposed, I think, more than anything else that I can remember.
How do you mean? So a focus on that issue as opposed to harm minimisation? Or...
Yes, yes.
Do you recall some of the topics of discussion?
No, other than, no.
Whether was it considered a good idea, a bad idea? I mean, ultimately it was approved, but were there some members perhaps who needed convincing or the like? Or was
Not that I
the
can
general-
recollect.
Okay. Now, how about the reliance on those figures from the Productivity Commission in 1999? So this is fast forwarding 11 years, you're relying on the prevalence statistics. Did you or any of the other GWC members question that at all at the time?
But from memory, weren't those figures extrapolated forward to give an indication of the current problem?
In that impact assessment?
Yes.
Now that extrapolation though, that was by someone at the department?
No, by the Gaming Commission. By the Productivity Commission. I'm not sure now, but I can remember it being there.
Someone had said, should we be relying on
Yeah.
1999 figures?
Yeah.
But if there was that extrapolation, did that satisfy members that you were relying on, well, someone
More
relying
current, yes.
more current statistics?
Yeah.
Now, are you aware whether the GWC, during your time as a member, initiated any of its own research into the prevalence of gambling harm?
No,
You don't recall, or you don't think that it happened?
I can't remember doing it, not in my time.
Now, the expansion was talked about in a number of GWC meetings in 2010. Do you recall in July 2010 meeting that Mr. Sargent tabled a letter from someone from the Public Health Advocacy Institute of WA, a Professor Dorbe, or Dorb? Do you recall that?
Oh,
at all?
yes.
I'll bring that document up for you to refresh
Yeah.
your memories. And just on the private screen, please, gwc.0002.0016.0012, just page 5, please. And you'll see in the top right-hand corner it says tabled there. And if we could bring up page 5 and 6 side by side, please. I'll give you a moment just to refamiliarise yourself with that letter. Is that the letter, when you said that you recalled the letter, that's the one you were thinking of?
Mike Dorb, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I'll bring up the minutes of the July 2010 meeting where this letter was tabled, gwc.0002.0016.0014. And just if we could bring up the first page to confirm the attendees, please. You can see your third from the bottom there, Mr. Harrison. And if we can go down to page 11 and 12, please. Perhaps have those side by side. So under general business, the bottom of page 11, Mr. Harrison, you can see that the chairman tabled the correspondence. Do you recall what discussion was had about that letter?
Professor Dorb was well known for his advocacy on cigarette smoking, and I think there was a general feeling that he was just almost making a motherhood statement in respect to gambling.
So was his letter taken seriously?
I don't think so, no.
And is that because what you said then, that it was considered a motherhood statement rather than a genuine concern?
Yeah, it was thought perhaps he was developing a concept of gambling, but that's all I can remember about it, yeah.
They say developing a concept of gambling.
Concept of the danger of gambling.
I see. And did that concern the GWC that he might be developing that concept?
I don't recollect any comment about it.
Do you know if a reply was sent to this letter? Whether the GWC agreed that a letter should be sent in reply?
No, I don't know.
Looking back now, do you think the GWC should have taken that letter more seriously?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Well, the only other thing I could assume, perhaps it was passed on to the gambling support unit people, because we didn't generally have a lot of detailed information on the danger of gambling.
And did the GWC ever take steps to inform itself of those dangers?
Well, in my case, I attended the Burswood's gambling support unit and followed up with what they did.
And when was that?
I don't know what year it would have been, but it was during that. I think it was in that my period of my first term.
Early on in your tenure?
Yes, yeah.
And what brought on that, you going to the casino to look at that unit? Did that request to see the facilities come from the GWC, or were
that came
offering?
Came from the GWC. We went over to the Responsible Service of Gambling unit as a group and met the key people involved.
And what's
and listened to their problems.
So who were the key people? Are you talking psychologists or management people?
The management, I think there was a manager and up to 10 assistants or something like that.
And what did you learn from that tour, if you like to call it a tour?
Oh, they went through and explained some of the actions that they took to follow up on responsible gambling, signage and things of that nature.
And what was the GWC's feeling about that once that tour was over? Did they think the casino was doing a good job, or that there were areas for improvement, or what was the general consensus between the GWC members?
No, there was an acceptance that it was a developing unit but was doing a good job at that stage.
Were you provided with any statistics at that stage as to, how many people were attending that unit?
No.
And in terms of the length of that tour, do you recall, was it, an hour, half a day, or do you recall how long you were there?
It may have been an hour to 2 hours.
And was it an interactive tour? The members could ask questions?
Yes.
And did they?
Yes.
Do you recall? I know it's going back quite some time, but were there any particular areas of particular interest that stick out in your mind?
No, not that I recall.
right, turning now to 2012, do you recall that in 2012 Crown applied to increase the number of EGMs at the casino again?
Yes.
Now I'll bring up the minutes first. So it's GWC.002.0016.0081. So from November 2012, and you'll see fourth line down that you were present at that meeting, Mr. Harrison.
Yes.
And if we could just scroll to item 4.2, should be on pages 2 and 3, if we could have those side by side, please. Perhaps just if you could read item 4.2 and the resolution just to yourself.
Yes.
So you'll see there from the resolution that there was an approval by the GWC to increase the gaming machines to 2,500, so an increase of 500 at a phased rate,
Yep.
and then also to table games as well.
Yes.
Now I'll go back to the agenda item when it was first tabled back in August 2012. Could we please bring up GWC.0002.0016.0069? And just while that document's coming up, Mr. Harrison, I just wanted to ask you one question going back to the topic of the tour of the RSG unit at Crown or Burswood. So that occurred in the beginning of your tenure, as best you recall. Did you ever go back? Did you ever go back and tour those facilities at a later stage?
No.
Was there ever any offer to?
No.
Did the GWC ever ask to?
Not that I can recall.
Thank you. All right, we're just going to look at item 5.2, please, on page 26. Now, if we just scroll down to page 27, please, and I just want to draw your attention to the first paragraph there, and you'll see the reference there again to the Productivity Commission in 1999, and then a 1994 survey.
Yes.
Now, if we go to, all right, and you'll see the sentence also there that it says, these are the only surveys conducted in Western Australia. You see that on the last sentence in the first paragraph?
Yes.
And now I'll just bring up the November 2012 agenda, please, GWC.002.0016.0077. Page 25, please. And this is another one of those impact assessments, Mr. Harrison. And this is the page on harm minimisation. there's again a reference to the 1999 productivity findings and the
Yep.
prevalence. You see that?
Yes.
And there's also a reference to some comments of Senator Xenophon in relation to EGMs.
Yes.
You see that in the third paragraph?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll give
yes,
you a
yeah,
moment
yeah,
to
yeah.
familiarise. Now, were these matters taken into account by the GWC when it was deciding whether to approve the increase in the EGMs and table games?
Yes.
Do you think it was appropriate that a decision was made without updated research on the prevalence of problem gambling within Western Australia?
Well, there was that extrapolation of figures, but one of the main points of the Productivity Commission's report was that the destination marketing and focusing all of the EGMs at Burswood was keeping the problem gambling down as an option to what was happening on the East Coast.
And so in that case, in your view, it was appropriate to take that 1999 report into account?
Yes.
How about Senator Xenophon's comments? Do you think those comments should have been taken into account?
Well, they may have been, but I think the general feeling was offset by the potential expansion of the whole Burswood resort. The benefits economically, socially, employment and everything else far outweighed the increase in the number of machines.
I see. Was greater emphasis, weighing those factors, was greater emphasis placed on those things as opposed to harm minimisation?
Yes.
And do you recall why that was?
No.
Now, if I could just turn to page 23 of your witness statement. Sorry, paragraph 23. Oh, and just one follow-up question, sorry, back on the topic of the expansion. Do you think the GWC had the balance right in putting the economic factors above harm minimisation?
Yes, because I think we never saw the problem gambling as a major problem within Western Australia compared with on the East Coast or in other states.
But is that perhaps because you didn't have up-to-date research on that issue?
No, it was generally known from meetings with the regulatory authorities that it wasn't the same problem. And in my case, I had a fair bit of experience operating properties on the East Coast, and I was familiar with the gambling problems over on the East Coast from poker machines.
I see. Now, just turning back to paragraph 23 of your witness statement, if I may. And you make reference to available information and that it indicated that problem gambling was less prevalent in WA due to the lack of EGMs in the state. By available information, do you mean the information that was made available to you as a member of the GWC, or is it a combination of what you were just talking about, your own personal knowledge, personal experience?
Personal experience and I think the Productivity Commission statements.
Okay, and the Productivity Commission reports, were they the only thing made available to the GWC members?
Yes, To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay. And now, just in the first part of paragraph 23, you refer to the Australian Medical Association health effect of problem gambling position statement issued in either 2012 or 2013. If we could bring up, please, pub.007.007.0013. And if we could just scroll through that document slowly. I just want to ascertain, Mr. Harrison, is this the document that you're referring to in your witness statement?
Yes.
And when did you first come across this document?
I can't recall.
Did you find the article yourself, or was it provided to your...
Oh, no, it was provided by the department.
while you were a member of the GWC?
Yes.
All right. Now, Mr. Harrison, I think you referred to this committee by a slightly different name, but you were aware of the Problem Gambling Support Services Committee during your time on the GWC?
Yes.
Do you recall when you found out about it?
Well, it was included in the financial reports, so there would have been an inquiry when you first received those.
And how did it appear in the financial reports?
Well, there was an allocation of funds from the commission, and there was a trust fund which was administered by the commission.
I see. So is that how you found out about the PG, I'll call it the PGSSC, because you saw a line item in the financial reports, or did someone brief you from the department, GWC or otherwise?
No, I can't recall how I found out, but yeah.
Do you recall if you, in terms of your tenure of nine years, I think it was, did you find out, do you recall if you found out about it early on, later on?
No, it was fairly early on.
Fairly early.
Yeah.
Could you explain to the Commissioner what your understanding of the PGSSC, what it did and what it was effectively?
Well, it was made up from the key government departments and health involved in gambling, such as the casino, Lottery West, Racing WA, and they provided funding to assist in problem gambling.
And how did it assist in problem gambling?
There was a 24-hour hotline, face-to-face counselling. There was an online counselling service.
What do you mean by an online counselling service?
That was a number that could be contacted to seek advice if you had a gambling problem.
So different to the hotline?
I don't know.
Were you aware that the PGSSC was formed in 1995?
No.
Do you know how often the PGSSC met?
No.
And in terms of the funding, you might have touched on this already, but if you could just clarify what you understood, how that funding, how that committee was funded.
Well, it was funded by all of those members, except I think from memory, the Department of Health.
And was there a set contribution each of those?
No, from memory it varied. I think Burswood was a major funder. I think it varied from different members.
Do you know if those contributions were voluntary?
Yes.
They were voluntary?
Yes.
As far as you understood? Okay. Now, you say in paragraph 24 of your witness statement that in your last year on the GWC, the department provided an annual contribution of $56,000.
Yes.
Now, was the $56,000 of GWC funds administered by the department?
No, it went into the trust fund, which was the problem game support unit.
Sorry, I think I've phrased it terribly. The department looked after the funds for the GWC, so its financial people made that transfer to the PGSSC. Is that your understanding how practically it happened?
Yes, yes.
Now, was the GWC contribution an annual contribution?
Yes.
And was it ever discussed at the GWC meetings?
No, not to my recollection. One of the problems I found with the accounts that there wasn't enough time spent on those trust accounts in effect as to where the money went.
So did the GWC in effect find out about what the contribution to the PGSSC was after the fact?
No, I think I'm assuming that it was approved that when the budgets were presented, we had the right to query it, adjust it, decrease it, whatever we felt.
So there was discussion about what that amount, that contribution from the GWC would be?
Yeah.
Do you know whether the PGSSC always had a GWC member sitting on it?
Well, no. The only person that I knew sat on it was the chairman, who was
Mr. Sargent?
Yes, and he chaired that committee.
Did that committee ever report to the GWC?
No, only through Mr. Sargent.
And how often was he reporting, just providing an update what it was doing?
Yes.
And were they frequent updates?
No.
Was it, say, once a year, once every 6 months, once every 2 years, do you recall?
Oh, it was 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, yes. And what would Mr. Sargent, was there a general update that he would, I'm just trying to work out what was
Well,
in those
he may
updates.
have reported on how there was an increase in the hotline replies, things of that nature.
Okay. But were you ever, as a GWC member, provided any papers in relation, like a
No.
paper update or anything like that? It was just always verbal?
Yes.
Do you recall the GWC's power under the GWC Act to create subcommittees?
Yes.
I'll bring up that section of the Act, section 15. So pub.0004.0005.0107. Just page, if we could have, please, page 30 and 31 side by side. So perhaps I'll get you to read section 15 to yourself, Mr. Harrison.
So you're just talking 15?
Yes,
Yes.
please. You've read that?
Yes.
Now, do you understand the PGSSC, when you were a member of the GWC, did you understand that committee to be a subcommittee of the GWC?
No.
Did anyone ever tell you one way or the other?
No.
Do you know if any of the powers of the GWC were delegated to the PGSSC?
No.
You don't know, or
No, I don't know.
Okay. Now, in paragraph 26 of your witness statement, you refer to a $2 million one-off payment by Crown and then an annual appropriation by Crown Perth of $500,000.
Yes.
Is it your understanding that the appropriation was from Crown Perth and not the government?
Yes.
And how did you reach that understanding?
That was tabled in one of the submissions from Crown to the Commission as a part of their expansion plans and what they were doing in respect to problem gambling.
All right. Now, you mentioned also in your witness statement the management of funds being undertaken, those funds being undertaken collaboratively between the department and the Department of Communities. What do you know about that collaboration?
Well, the funds were collected by the department on behalf of the Commission, the Department of Washing, Gaming and Liquor, but then they were forwarded on to the Department of Communities to administer the programs.
Do you know how they were administered?
No.
Who informed you about the collaboration? Do you recall?
No.
Now, you also reference in your witness statement the Beyond Gambling Grants program. How did you understand that that worked? Was that part of these funds we've just been talking about, or was it a separate thing? Was the PGSSC involved, or?
No, that was the... sorry, can you repeat that question?
I just want to get an understanding of your understanding of how the Beyond Gambling Grants program worked.
Well, that was administered by Burswood.
And so
Oh, sorry, no. Let me get that correct. That was that money from Burswood was forwarded to the Commission and on to the Department of Communities and then they found different.
So it was the annual $500,000 as far as you were aware, how that money was allocated. And did you have any understanding of how the decision of particular grants was made? Who would receive those grants?
Yeah, Department of Communities.
And was that ever reported back to the GWC?
No.
Now, you refer in paragraph 29 of your witness statement to Crown's Responsible Service of Gambling Unit, which you say was established in 2006. And you spoke earlier about the tour or the visit to Crown or Burswood, as it might have been then, that the GWC members took part in. Now, at paragraph 30, you say that GWC had an advisory capacity. in respect of the activities conducted by the RSG unit. What do you mean by advisory capacity?
I think they, and from memory, they passed on information that they received.
Who's they?
The officers from the commission or from the department in respect to the I'll get those names right now. The responsible service of to the responsible service of gambling unit from the gambling support unit, which they administered.
Sorry, so if I could just clarify what you
So
mean.
the information they got from the PGSSC,
This is, you're talking about the department,
Yeah.
the information the department got?
Yeah.
Yes?
that information helped, and they forwarded that on to the to Burswood to support their responsible service of gambling unit.
I see. And do you know when that process commenced?
I think it was more of an ongoing situation between the officers of the department and the head of the responsible service of gambling unit at Burswood.
But going back to the GWC's advisory capacity that you referred to, are you able to give the Commission some clarity about what that advisory role entailed, or how the GWC oversaw the RSG unit?
No.
So it was more, is it the case that it was more the department passing on the information rather than the GWC having an active role in that space?
Yes.
Did the GWC ever require Crown or Burswood to report to it in respect of its RSG activities?
No. Not that I've been advised. We got the statistics on, self-exclusion and third-party exclusions, stuff like that. But
Did the GWC ever do anything with that information? By that I mean, if there were concerning numbers, did you ever go back to the RSG unit and ask about that and what was
Yes.
being done?
yes,
You recall that happening?
yes,
Do you recall any processes changing at the RSG unit as a result of what the GWC had interrogated?
no.
Did any third party ever assess or audit Crown's RSG unit when you were on the GWC?
Not that I'm aware.
Were you satisfied during your tenure that Crown was doing all that it could on the RSG front? Or did you feel that there was room for improvement?
No. They gave reasonable explanations as to what they were doing.
So you were satisfied?
Yes.
How about the GWC's regulation of the RSG procedures that Crown had in place? In your view, could the GWC have done more?
Yes, yes.
What do you think it could have or should have done?
Well, it could have taken a more active involvement, perhaps. wouldn't have needed somebody on the committee, but more liaison as to what they were doing and explanations.
When you say you wouldn't have wanted someone on the committee, what do you mean by that?
On their own committee, the Burswood's committee.
Someone from the GWC?
Yeah.
You're saying that's not a great idea, is that what you were saying?
Well, it would have been by invitation, as far as I know. There wasn't that invitation.
But you were aware that Crown had a committee dealing with these issues, had their own committee?
They had a more senior committee, but I think from memory that wasn't established till maybe after I left. And I know there was a committee established for gambling at a higher level in addition to the responsible service gambling unit.
Okay, so like a responsible service of gambling committee?
Yes.
Do you ever recall anyone from Crown or Burswood coming to the GWC to present? And I know we spoke about the tour. Was there any other presentation to the GWC about how they were tackling that issue?
Not that I can recall.
Might be a good
Thank you, Ms.
time.
Spencer. Mr. Harrison will take a break for about 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you.
All right.
We'll adjourn until 11:35. Thank you. Chair. Thank you, Ms Spencer.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, Mr Harrison, you're referring your witness statement to the GWC's policy governing ATM placement at the casino, and paragraph 34, the prohibition from the gaming floor being located within 40 minutes walking distance and having a maximum withdrawal limit of $400. You're on paragraph
Yep.
34, yes? Can you explain to the Commission how it is that the GWC landed on those 3 points?
The $400 limit and the distance, I believe, is a part of the Australian standards. And arriving at it, there was a lot of debate at the time because where the machines were located, as the crow flies, were less than 40 metres. So we spent
As the crow flies.
from the entrance to the gaming room, and we realised there was a need to make sure there was that break away from the gambling facilities to the cashing facilities to allow people to get away. So it was accepted that to get to the gaming machines you had to walk more than 40 metres.
Did the GWC consult any external parties or get any expert advice when deciding on this ATM policy?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And you referred just a moment ago to the Australian standards. What Australian standards are you referring to?
I can't remember. There were general gaming facility standards that were accepted by the regulators.
Did the GWC consult any other regulators in relation to the ATM issue?
Not that I'm aware of.
Or do any kind of comparison itself what other states were doing in that space?
Not that I'm aware of. I've made an assumption they have, but I can't verify that.
You can't recall?
No.
Now, I'll just turn now, Mr Harrison, to the financial matters. Now, you say in paragraph 9 of your witness statement that Mr Terry briefed you on finances when you joined the GWC, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, it's the case that the department took care of the finances for the GWC because the GWC had no staff, is that right?
Yes.
And the financial matters, so including financial reports, were reported to the GWC through the agendas. Is that what you recall?
Yes.
Now, on the whole, when these financial reports were included in the GWC agenda papers, how did you find them? And I think you touched on this earlier, but did you find them easy to understand?
Relatively, yes. Yeah.
Did they contain enough detail?
There was two areas. I thought the KPIs were more transactional. They were more of an audit where they could have been more of a strategic direction, but then there was no real strategic plan for them to follow.
You're talking about for the financial side?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the obvious other one was the service fee, which was a lump sum and needed investigating.
So in your view, there wasn't enough detail about the service fee?
Yes.
Did you try and do anything about that during your time on the GWC?
Yeah, I at times queried the Chief Financial Officer or the Chairman as to any increases or decreases. I can remember at one stage there was quite a substantial increase, and the query was why. It was far beyond the CPI, and it was explained to me because there's a substantial increase then in the salary and wages paid by the public service.
I see.
But generally the increases were just a flow-on effect each year.
And when you made those inquiries of the chairman or the financial officer, did you find that the information that came back to you was adequate, that it resolved your queries, or were there times when it really didn't satisfy you?
No, I guess the danger was that you didn't want to seem to be micromanaging the accounts either. The rest of the accounts were fairly straightforward to follow, and it was only those two areas, but on reflection, I think they should have been probed more in depth.
Sure. Okay, and the fear of micromanaging, how was that grounded? Why was there that concern about micromanaging?
Oh, that was a self-fear that had developed, I guess, from sitting on boards and seeing at stages where people were getting in probing substantially minor matters, which could have, bogging things down.
So you didn't want to be seen to be a disruptor or something like that, is that?
Oh, not that I want to, I just felt that, you could only spend so much time on different cases.
I see. Now, in paragraph 12 of your witness statement, you say that the service fee charged by the department was reviewed on the presentation of each budget. That's correct?
Yeah.
And in the next sentence you say, once accepted, the fee generally remained static. Was there an ability to not accept the service fee?
Yes, but it was just charged out at the monthly, on the monthly basis, basically divided by the annual fee divided by 12.
But did the GWC, I'm just trying to understand what you mean by accepted and the ability that you just said.
What I mean by that was once approved, should have been.
Was there ever an occasion where the service fee was not accepted that you recall, or not approved?
No. It was queried, but approved, finally approved.
Queried, but none of those queries ever led to the service charge being changed?
Yes.
It never changed. Okay. Do you recall a GWC meeting in March 2009 which considered a significant increase in the service charge?
Would that have been at the time of the increase in the public service fees? I can't recall it.
That's all right. I'll take you to the agenda item to refresh your memory. That's GWC.007.11.0043. And if we could go down to page 497, please. And I'll just draw your attention to the second last dot point in relation to operating expenses, where it says recoupment for services received from racing, gaming and liquor has increased by $771,344 due to a review of fees and charges exercise undertaken by racing, gaming and liquor. This figure is now a true indication of the costs and services provided by the department. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now if we just scroll down to page 500, please. So that point there was flagging the increase, and I just want to show you the statement that goes with that. Now, if you see on this page, under operating expenses, the fourth item, recruitment for services received from the DRGL.
Yes.
And you can see the annual budget in the last column, 3.958 million for 2009-2010.
Yes.
And then the estimated actual 2008-2009 is 3.187 million.
Yes.
So that accounts for that $771,000 increase.
Yes.
Now I'll just take you to the minutes where that was considered. So DLG.008.0015.5549. And if we could go to page 4, just to confirm the attendees. I will say these are draft minutes, Mr. Harrison, but we can see there the last name under the present list.
Yes.
And if we could go to page 12, please, item 9.2. Now, firstly, do you agree that that increase of the 771,000 is a large increase in service fees?
Yes.
Is this perhaps the scenario you were recalling earlier where there was a huge jump?
No. I think when that was queried, it was explained that the department had gone through a major review of all of its operating expenses, and that was the result of when they reanalysed everything.
You're referring now to this agenda item, the 771,000.
Yeah.
So are you thinking of another, when you gave evidence earlier about a large increase in the service fee, are you thinking of another occasion when there was a big jump?
Yes, I just remember it happening, you know. Yeah, I don't know.
So you don't know the date?
Which, you know.
But it might have been this one.
It could have been this one, but this one I remember was largely due to them having a reorganising and a refocusing within the department, and they found that they were perhaps undercharging in the past.
I see. Now, you'll see there at 9.2 when the budget was considered, there's no debate recorded there in terms of that $771,000 increase. Do you recall whether that was interrogated by the members who were present at that meeting?
The 770?
Yes.
Well, only that I can remember just asking that question.
Of the chairman?
Chairman, would have been the chairman, yes.
So there was no one there from the department, finance, dealing with the financial matters. There was no one.
I'm unsure. Could have been.
Well, in fact, we can have a look at the attendance.
No, I don't think there was.
On page 4. I think you're right, I don't think anyone was, but let's just confirm. It was on page 4, please. Sorry, Mr. Harrison.
I'm almost certain it wasn't. Yeah.
Yes. I don't think the left hand's speaking to the right hand here. I think we have a frozen screen issue. We'll come back to that. Were you ever given, so just in you asked questions of Mr Sargent, the chairman at the time, about that 771,000. That's your recollection?
About the increase, yes.
Yes. And were you satisfied with his response, or did you want further information?
No, and I think from memory he also referred some of the answers to other members of the who were in attendance from members of the department who verified whether the cost increases in their department, in their sections of the department.
Okay. Were you ever given a detailed breakdown or explanation of the
No.
methodology?
No.
Or just, this is the lump sum and just a sort of perhaps vague explanation that prices have gone up?
Yeah, and some verification from other departmental officers who were in attendance at the time.
But no breakdown of the, in this case it was 3.958 million, that 1 million relates to this,
No.
2 million relates to this.
No.
Is that something you think would have assisted?
Reflection, yes, yes.
Now, keeping with the 2009 financial year, do you recall at the time whether the GWC had a website?
No.
You don't recall?
No.
I'll just see if we can bring up a document.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just go back to that page 4, just looking at the attendees of that meeting. Now, are any of those attendees on that list, Mr Harrison, from the finance?
No, no.
No? Okay. All right, back to the website issue. If we could bring up gwc.002.0016.0016.002_R. If we could start at page 156, please. So this is an agenda item dealing with the finances of the GWC. And if we just scroll through this document, please. I don't need you to read the entirety, Mr Harrison. I just want to ask a question about a particular point. But you recall receiving these types of documents?
Yes, yes.
And if we could stop it when we get to page 163, please. Now, there is a line item there, capital under operating expenses, capital expenses, web design, the 5th item down. Do you see that?
Yes, yes.
And there's an annual budget and actual money spent in 2008-2009, so the
Yes.
2009 financial year of $260,000. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you recall what this was for?
Oh. Trying to get my memory. It'll come back in a minute. I can't recall at the moment.
And you can't recall whether there was a website planned or...
I don't think it was actually a website. It was to do with the electronic recording of information, but I'm uncertain that it was a web design. Something.
So not necessarily for a website,
No,
but you can't recall what it was for exactly. All right, thank you. Moving on to...
Well, I'm almost certain it wasn't for a website.
Okay. If it comes back to you through
Yeah.
the course of today, let me know.
Yeah.
Now, moving on to another topic, the Four Corners program, High Rollers, High Risk. Now, paragraph 18 of your statement, you say that it came to your attention through GWC board papers for the GWC meeting on the 23rd of September. Is that correct?
Yes?
Did you receive any earlier notification of this program airing? So was there any email from any other GWC members, or it was just when you received your agenda pack as a matter of course?
On receipt of the agenda pack.
Sure. After it was brought to your attention, did you go and watch the show at the time?
No.
Any particular reason why not?
Because it would have been because I would have only just had receipt of the agenda papers in the day or so before. Matter of time. I just wouldn't have had time to review it. I made a point of doing it when I got after the meeting, but before I don't remember doing it.
All right. Did anyone at the department or the GWC, did they advise you to watch it, or you just took it upon yourself after the meeting to do so?
I took it upon myself.
Were you alarmed when you first read about it in the board pack?
No, not substantially. I was just prepared to listen to the comments of the department as to because I felt all along. I just had to wait and see, really.
All right. Now, before I ask you about, do you recall a report coming from Mr. Connolly at a meeting of the GWC about this program?
Yes, yeah.
Now, before I ask you about that report, what was your understanding prior to the report on the international commission business at Crown?
In what sense?
Did you know, had you heard of the international commission business?
Yes, yes.
And what did you understand that was about?
Well, it was about the junket operations or specialised overseas business.
What sort of overseas business to do with Crown?
To do with, gambling, yeah.
Attracting people to come to Crown?
Yes. But they didn't necessarily have to be junket operations.
Okay. So individuals too?
Yep.
And so your understanding was all that fell under this umbrella of the international commission business of Crown?
Yes.
Now, turning to the agenda item for the December 2014 meeting, if we could bring that up, gwc.0002.0016.0121. If we could turn to page 53, please. And if we could just scroll through 53, 54 and 55, please. Does this agenda item look familiar to you, Mr Harrison?
Yes.
If we could just go back to page 53, please. And there's a recommendation that the report, a recommendation by Mr Conley that the report be noted. Now, in terms of pulling together the information in this paper, do you know what the source of the information was? So Mr Conley is the author of that paper. Do you know if he made inquiries with Crown or was it information from his own knowledge?
I think that would have been from his own knowledge.
Was it said either way when Mr Conley presented that paper, whether he'd spoken to Crown or not?
No, it wasn't mentioned, but I think, can I just go back to...
Yes, of course. What, the first page?
I think that was all accepted as being general knowledge of what was happening at Crown and at other casinos.
All right. Now at page 55, if we could bring that page up, please. Sorry, it might be on page 54. Could bring that back up. I might just leave that point and come back to that later. Now turning to the minutes of this meeting, GWC.0002.0016.0123. We could bring that up, please. And we see you're listed as an attendee of that meeting on the 16th of December 2014.
Yes.
Now for turning to item 5.4, on I think the next page. Just at the bottom of the page there, International Commission Business. It says the Deputy Director General, Mr Conley, presented a paper explaining the current role of the Commission. What can you recall from the presentation of this paper? Can you recall anything?
He went through all the checks and balances that the Commission carried out, but specifically left out the roles of tracking the high rollers and the junket operators as to money laundering and roles taken on by Austrac and other federal agencies.
So when you say left out roles, he was explaining that that was the role of Austrac and...
Yeah, he presented the roles, the papers, he presented what the Commission did separately and said this is not a part of our responsibilities.
Okay. Now what was your sense of Mr Conley's attitude to the Four Corners program during that meeting? So was it nothing to worry about, or was there genuine concern, or?
It was more of a wait and see and let's see what develops, you know.
All right. Did you feel that Mr. Connolly was giving an impartial view?
Yes.
Do you recall any of the other members' reactions to the presentation? Was there any concern raised by any of the other members?
Not after the explanation by Mr. Connolly. I don't think there was.
And were you concerned?
No, I accepted what he was saying.
Do you recall if much time was spent during that meeting on this issue?
No, I can't recall.
Do you recall whether Crown presented anything to the GWC to address this Four Corners program?
Not at that stage. I mean, we were aware that any investigations by Crown into money laundering and things of that nature couldn't be passed on to us. So no, I don't think they did.
Do you recall if the GWC ever asked Crown to come and present on those media allegations in that Four Corners program?
Not that I'm aware.
Now, just moving on to the casino compliance strategy, which you referred to from paragraph 43 of your statement. Now, you say at paragraph 44 that the strategy, as in the casino compliance strategy, has a proactive and risk-based approach with a strong focus in areas considered high risk and the likelihood of unwanted or unlawful activity. What were some of the risks the GWC identified?
Oh, well, it was in the conduct and the playing of the game, the money accounting for the money.
How do you mean accounting for the money?
Well, the receipt of money for gambling as to where it went into storage, how it tallied with the records.
So are you talking about the cash coming in
Yes.
to the casino and where that?
Yeah.
Okay. The safe storage of
Yep.
that.
All of the internal controls and the administration and the accounting for all of the procedures that were in the casino manual.
All right. Now you mentioned another risk was the conduct of games. What risk are you referring to there?
Well, that the casino staff were operating them correctly.
So by correctly, you mean following the rules?
Yes.
So you've got the conduct of games risk and the accounting of funds risk. Can you think of any others sitting here today that were identified by the GWC?
Well, the whole surveillance of the games to make sure that surveillance was properly there, that nobody was that the conduct of the games was correct.
Now, whose responsibility was it to identify the risks at the casino? Was it anyone's?
Well, the casino management obviously had an interest in identifying the risks as a self-protection as to their own revenue and security, but the commissioned inspectors oversaw that role.
So would the GWC get feedback from those inspectors from time to time, alerting as to risks that need to be managed?
All the time, yes.
Can you think of one of the risks that the inspectors identified that hadn't been dealt with previously, addressed, not dealt with, that hadn't been addressed? So a new risk. Can you think of a new risk that was identified during your tenure on the GWC?
Not that I can recall. They were more individual.
And did the identification of risk from these inspectors, did it decrease when the inspectors were removed from the floor?
Well, it changed with the change of, I think it changed when the surveillance changed.
When it became more surveillance?
Electronic surveillance, rather than physically.
And did you find that more or less risks were identified?
There was more identified.
Can you think of what any of those were?
No.
So in your view, was the risks at the casino something which the GWC frequently turned its mind to?
Yes, all the time.
Did the GWC ever seek advice from an independent third party as to what the risks might be?
Well, the members of the commission, or more members of the department on behalf of the commission, were constantly in communication with other casinos as to what risks they were experiencing and
Other, do you mean regulators or the
other
actual-
regulators,
Other
yeah.
regulators within Australia?
yeah.
And did they report back to the GWC?
They did advise of risks that had arisen from time to time.
Can you think of any examples of any risks which were identified through that process?
No.
Now, in paragraph 44 of your statement, you refer to the detailed activities adopted for the casino's table games, EGMs, revenue and tax, surveillance, security control of contracts and approved suppliers.
Yeah.
What are the detailed activities you're referring to there?
What was detailed in the casino manual and the games manual?
Can you think of an example of the activities you're thinking of?
Oh, going back again to the internal controls, the admin, accounting procedures, the conduct of the playing of the game.
Was audits one of those activities?
Yes,
And who is it that undertook those activities?
the inspectors.
and the GWC were regularly updated by the inspectors as to their activities?
Through the
As to
chief,
what they-
through the chief casino officer.
I see.
Yeah.
Was it every meeting, was there an update on that front, or was it less frequently?
No, there was an update on, particularly on any risks that had come up. They were updated at each meeting.
And what did these updates, were they written updates, or did you just get verbal updates from the chief casino officer?
There was a mixture.
Now, at paragraph 45 of your statement, you say the audit and inspection programs were implemented by the development of operational plans in accordance with the casino compliance strategy. What do you mean by that statement?
Well, included in the casino compliance strategy, there was a requirement for an inspector to conduct an audit on at least one game every month. So, is that what you're asking? Or,
I'm just trying to understand what the sentence means. Perhaps would it assist if I brought up the casino compliance strategy in front of you?
well, yeah, I basically know that's audit and inspections and things of that nature, isn't it? Yeah. ATF certification.
Now, I'll just move on to paragraph 48. And you say that the casino compliance strategy was adopted with the objective of ensuring the ongoing suitability of the casino licensee and employees. Now, is the suitability of the licensee something which the GWC turned its mind to frequently?
No, because it was restricted by, there was nothing in the Act that allowed the Commission to act in that area. So it was more, that was always have to have been a recommendation, would have to come from the right, yeah. The Minister would have to have acted in that area.
So in your view, the GWC couldn't have any say as to whether or not the licensee was suitable? Was that your understanding at the time?
Oh, it could have a say in that, but it didn't have the ability to, and just from memory, review or query whether he was suitable. It had to come from the Minister to give that direction.
And in terms of what, in your view, suitability was, are you able to describe that concept?
No.
Was there any matters that you recall that the GWC considered? Sorry, I withdraw that. I have no further questions, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Ms Spencer. I'll invite counsel representing other parties to ask any questions if there are any. It appears not. Oh, yes?
Yes. Ms. Wren, I appear for the Crown entities. Mr. Harrison, as I said, my name's Ms. Wren and I appear for the Crown Group entities.
Yes.
You asked some questions by counsel assisting about Crown Perth's responsible service of gambling unit and programs.
Yes.
Just wanted to ask you a couple more questions about them. There was no legislation or formal GWC policy requiring Crown Perth to have a RSG unit or programs in place.
To the best of my knowledge. Yeah.
And the GWC itself did not provide any directions or recommendations as to particular steps or things that Crown Perth should include in its RSG programs.
Not that I know.
So the RSG programs that Crown Perth had in place were essentially a voluntary initiative of Crown Perth
Yes.
and essentially self-directed.
Yes.
And you said this morning that the GWC never initiated its own research into problem gambling in your time in the GWC. During that time, did the GWC ever ask Crown Perth or suggest to Crown Perth that Crown Perth should undertake any analysis as to the nature and extent of problem gambling at the
Not that
casino?
I'm aware of.
And you also said that Crown Perth never gave a further presentation on its RSG programs during your time on the commission, other than the initial presentation when you went to the unit. Did the GWC ever ask Crown Perth to give a further presentation or to give further information about its programs?
Not that I'm aware of.
Just wanted to turn to ask you a few questions about the national standards that apply for gaming machines.
Yes.
So you're aware that there is a Australia-New Zealand gaming machine national standard,
Yes.
and it sets out technical standards that govern the design of gaming machines and gaming machine software.
Yes.
And there's a WA appendix to the national standard,
Yes.
and that sets out WA specific requirements that are in addition to or different to the national standard.
That's right. Yeah.
And the GWC is responsible for setting the content of the WA appendix.
Yes.
And developers of EGM games have to have games tested and certified by an independent accredited testing authority as complying with the national standard and the WA appendix.
Yes.
Yeah, before the game's approved by the GWC.
Yes, that's correct.
And do you agree that it was the GWC's responsibility to put in place those appropriate standards for the design of EGM games to be used in WA?
Yes.
And those standards could address any concerns about game features that might have an impact on problem gambling issues.
Yes.
And during your time on the GWC, Crown Perth regularly presented to the GWC seeking approval for particular EGM games.
Yes.
And those games are put forward on the understanding that the new games would be designed by the manufacturers in accordance with the national standard and the WA appendix,
Yes.
and would be tested and accredited by the ATFs.
Yes.
Did the GWC itself, in approving those individual EGM games, ever conduct any assessment of whether that particular game might have features that encourage problem gambling?
No.
And did the GWC, in your time, ever direct Crown Perth to conduct any assessment of EGMs after their introduction at the Perth Casino to assess whether those games might have had features that encourage problem gambling?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay. And the GWC itself didn't conduct any investigation of that nature?
Not that I'm aware.
During the presentations that Crown Perth gave to the GWC on EGM games, Crown Perth would normally play a video showing the game being played.
Yes.
And the games typically included a number of symbols that were revealed through some sort of mechanism like the ball dropping. Did you as a GWC member have a concern about the types of symbols that appeared?
Yes, there were some queries from time to time about different symbols. Yes.
And what were those queries?
I can't remember.
No further questions.
Very much. I don't have any further questions.
And nothing arising.
Thank you very much.
you.
Mr. Evans.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison, I just want to clarify a couple of things because Council Assisting asked you quite a number of questions about events which happened now nearly 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That is in relation to the approval of the expansion of the Burswood Casino back in 2012. And there are questions in particular around the evidence upon which the GWC acted in relation to making decisions which had harm minimisation implications. And you recall you were taken to some agenda papers prepared by way of a risk assessment, which was included in the papers for the meeting that approved that expansion. You recall that?
Yeah.
Can I have up that document? It's GWC .0002, .0016, .0069. We'll start at page 27. Now you recognise this. This was the paper which was put up by Mr. Sargent in relation to this dated the 6th of August 2012. Scroll up the previous page, it might make it easier for Mr. Harrison to orient himself. That's a paper to the members for agenda item 5.2 in relation to the redevelopment. You recognise that?
Yes.
Now, on page 27, that is on page 2 of 2, there's a reference to attachment 7, being a copy of a memorandum regarding Western Australia's prevalence of problem gambling from the Productivity Commission in 1999. And some questions were put to you along the lines of, did the GWC consider it should have had more recent information?
Yes.
Do you recall that question? Those questions? Can I take you to the bottom paragraph on that page? There's a reference to table 5.4, which summarises Australian prevalence studies from 1995 to 2009.
Yes.
Now, I take it you would have read these papers?
Yes.
You would have read all of the papers. Can I then take you a little deeper into this? Can I take you to page 62? Now, this is a page from the papers headed Problem Gambling. It's, in fact, part of a larger paper of quite considerable length from the Productivity Commission inquiry in March 2009. And if I can take you to the bottom of the first main paragraph, do you read that last sentence?
The percentage reduction?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that a factor you'd have taken into account in considering any expansion proposal?
Yes.
Can I take you to page 103? Now, this is the attachment 8, which was referred to in the first page I took you to. So this is a table, again extracted from the Productivity Commission paper,
Yes.
which summarises, or purports to summarise, I should say, all of the surveys then available to the Productivity Commission as at the date of its 2010 report. And you'll see that we make some assumptions here. There are a variety of jurisdictional surveys listed on a state-by-state basis.
Yes.
and you see a figure there, the gambling share of the population for each state. Now that's a factor you'd have taken into account, wouldn't you, and looked for any trends in relation to?
That's what I said when I said there was figures had been promulgated by the Productivity Commission.
Yes, and these are more recent figures from across Australia.
Yeah.
And you'd have taken those into account.
Yes.
Thank you. You also asked some questions just whether you'd have taken into account some comments by Senator Nick Xenophon.
Yes.
You'll recall that?
Yes.
Now, Senator Xenophon was a well-known opponent of gambling machines in general. You understand that? He was interviewed twice, as I understand it, in relation to this proposal, and those are also part of these papers. You may not recall that, but I'll take you to it. Can I start at page 104? You'll see this is a transcript of a radio interview with Senator Xenophon, on a Perth radio station at the ABC by John McGlue. And if we scroll down to page 105, there's a quote there attributed to Senator Xenophon. Can I take you to the end of the first line? The one great thing about Western Australia, there are many, but this is in a casino context. And the next paragraph.
Yes.
Now, does that reflect your experience? You indicated you'd operated hotels and other licensed premises in the East Coast.
Yes.
And does that reflect your experience of the views of the GWC at that relevant time?
Yes.
Thank you. Can I roll down to page 107? And can you read the paragraph attributed to Senator Xenophon there?
Yes.
And does that reflect the views and considerations of the GWC at the time, to your observation?
Yes. And again, the Productivity Commission confirmed that same argument.
Thank you. No further questions, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
No, nothing.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison, thanks for your evidence today. It's been of great assistance to the Commission. As I mentioned earlier, other commissioners may have questions, so the summons will remain in place for now, but you're certainly free to go with our thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn till 2 p.m.
All right.